You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
On today's episode of the Ashley Burgess podcast, I will be deconstructing the narcissistic relationship. When you get into a relationship with a narcissist, a romantic relationship, this is how it goes. This is the process. Very rarely does it go off this path. This path is generally the path. It's almost like most narcissists get this handbook, and then they practice this type of behavior, and it seems to happen across the board. It's almost like they're all in the same class. Now, I'm not saying that every type of narcissism is the same. Obviously, we have overt, we have covert, we have malignant, so it's not the same. But I'm generalizing the concept of narcissism, how these narcissistic relationships really go. And I'm talking mainly about overt narcissists, but also about covert narcissists, because I think that many of you would not get into a relationship with someone that appeared to be an overt, over-the-top narcissist. I think that many of you got into a relationship with somebody that was wearing a mask, somebody that was not being who they really were. They were putting on this facade for you to connect with them, to get close with them, to believe that they're on your side, to believe that they know you, all those good things. And then eventually you realize that's not the case. But unfortunately for many people, you don't know about some of the terminology, or you might know a situation, but you don't know what that means. So you know this is happening, but you don't really have a pinpoint word for it, or understanding the process, or being able to say this is what's happening in the situation, because maybe you haven't had that much experience, or you haven't been exposed to it that much. And I think that we really can't safeguard ourselves in situations that are toxic until we understand what type of situation we're in, what type of toxicity it is, and how to overcome it. Because we really can't deal with it otherwise. We can say, I think there's something wrong, or I think this person's self-centered, or I think it's this, or I think it's that. But when we finally figure out what it really is, then we can actually put connecting the dots and putting the pieces and putting the data points together. Okay, so how does a relationship look with somebody that has narcissistic tendencies, covert narcissistic tendencies? What does that look like? And how does it begin? Well, the beginning is very different than how it becomes. So the very beginning is the honeymoon stage that was never real. The honeymoon stage that was never real. It had no reality, no basis in reality. And the problem with having no basis in reality, this fantasy world, this fantasy beginning, is because the fantasy wasn't ever real. Okay. So unfortunately, we look toward that time in the relationship, hoping we could get that time back, but we're really hoping for something that really didn't truly exist. It existed, but it really didn't exist. It's almost like a mirage. It's like, there's something there, but that wasn't necessarily the truth. And then that began to change and augment very quickly. And eventually we're left with XYZ. So the beginning of it is interesting because there's a lot of idealization. There's a lot of putting a person on a pedestal. There's a lot of making this one person feel really good. And usually what I find, though, is the codependent, for the most part, is the perfect puzzle piece for the narcissist, the absolute perfect puzzle piece for the narcissist. Also, I find that people with borderline personality disorder can also be a good puzzle piece for the narcissist. And there's reasons for that. First off, the codependent is going to put the other person first and will get happiness because the other person is happy. They'll get happiness from doing things for other people because they've been trained that that's the only way that they should be happy. And we'll do a deep dive in codependency here in another podcast, because I wanted to find what codependency looks like. No, it is not in the DSM. Is it real? Yes. Just because it's not in the DSM doesn't mean it's not real. Okay, so sometimes some things that are in the DSM, are they completely as is? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. There's a lot of definitions for things that might not necessarily have specific definitions as they've defined. Some things can be very fluid. But let's go back to the concept of idealization. So in the beginning, the narcissist is going to idolize the other person. They're going to make them feel incredibly good. They're going to give them a bunch of intense attention, which we call love bombing. Many of you are very familiar with being love bombed, or the concept of love bombing, right? It's when somebody's giving you all these attentions, all this compliment, all this affection, all this stuff, all at one time. And for the most part, it feels really good, right? So it's whether you're codependent or have codependent tendencies and you haven't had this type of attention. Maybe you haven't felt this type of attention, you haven't been given this type of attention. So it feels really good. And it's like, wow, maybe I've met that soulmate, Now I understand what people talk about with soulmates. And maybe it's not just all, jib jab. Maybe there is some truth to it. Maybe there is fairy tale relationships. And this is what makes those relationships seem real. Is this time of the relationship, this beginning part of the relationship is what makes this feel real. It's what people like, oh my gosh, this is a fairy tale romance, it's a whirlwind romance. This is what this is about, because whirlwind romances and fairy tale romances don't last. Okay. And I'm just here to say that, unfortunately, after years and years of working with my clients and thousands of clients and relationships, and also I have friends and family dynamic as well, so I have access to a lot of people to know that that doesn't really exist. Now, in the beginning, it can appear that way, and I think many of us want that. But unfortunately, Hollywood and their spells and their stuff is very different than reality. And sometimes we think that that's what reality is like, even though it's not. So, in the idealization stage, there's a pedestal stage where the other person is put on the pedestal. They're made to feel really good, a lot of affection, a lot of attention, a lot of sex, a lot of all that. And you finally feel like somebody understands you, gets you, soulmate, all that stuff. And you begin to get more and more invested in this relationship, spending more time with them, almost inseparable with them. And that's exactly what they want, because they want to separate you from the tribe, separate you from family members. You don't know that though, but they don't really want you around anybody because they're almost like brainwashing you. And to me, it feels like brainwashing. It's almost like a cult, right? Where they get you away, they sequester you, you get all this like friends of the cult, everything's good, everybody's spending time with you, you're the number one person, you're everybody's favorite, you know what I'm saying? And then you're indoctrinated into this cult. Well, it's kind of similar, because the narcissist is basically creating this facade, this false narrative, so that you begin to tell them everything. The things that you haven't even told anybody else in your life, you begin to tell this person, which is very interesting. You even give things that you would never tell anybody, telling them some of your deepest secrets, some of the things you've never expressed to somebody. And so you actually begin to trust this person with your life, basically your life. Okay, so you're trusting this person that's giving you all this attention, basically with your life, and you're allowing this to happen. And you don't really know what's going on. You're just feeling really good, and this person has all this attention for you, and they're listening to things that you're talking about that other people haven't listened to. They're giving you this attention when other people in the past have not given you attention. Maybe you came out of a marriage that your wife or spouse wasn't listening to you about work, and this person's listening to everything you have to say about work. They're spending all this time with you. They're doing all these things. You're like, wow, well, I can trust them with anything. Okay, well, that's wrong, but I'll talk about that here in a bit, because this whole concept is devised to be able to get you to let your guard down specifically for a long period of time, so that they get all this information, get everything from you, and then they can turn it on you. Okay, so what we have here is we have the situation where you're feeling really great. You're feeling like you're on cloud nine. Things are perfect. It's this fairy tale fantasy vacation thing. I mean, it's just amazing. And you begin to get very attached. You get very emotionally invested in the situation, completely invested in the situation, and you begin to trust them, and you begin to envision a future with them. Now, at the same time, the narcissist is definitely telling you about the future that they want with you. They're even giving you a lot of future thoughts and plans. And some of these plans are quite long term plans: marriage, children, moving, all kinds of stuff, travel, international travel, like lots of stuff going on. Okay, so you begin to feel, okay, wow, this is amazing. I got this person, this is great, and we're going to have this long term relationship, and this is awesome. And I'm going to trust them with everything I have to say. Now you begin to trust them more and more. Now, one of the things that we don't realize in the love bombing phase is that the other person's not really telling us much about themselves. They are very closed lip. They will tell you a few things here and here, but other than that, they're not really telling you much. And you're not really thinking about it, because you're getting really self absorbed into this attention. You're not thinking clearly. Okay. You're kind of drinking the Kool Aid at this point. So you're not realizing that this person is very little describing. They're only telling you the things that they want you to know. They're also only telling you the things that they know that will make them look good, or the things that'll make them look like the victim. Okay, so maybe some things from childhood that were horrible, or some family dynamic stuff, or this horrible, like, abuse, or maybe they're talking, whatever, that they had to fend for themselves or do all these things or whatever makes them look like the hero. They're going to tell you those types of things and veil them as like, oh, I'm just, this is just me, just lowly me. This is my thing. And so you begin to just kind of accept those pieces of their supposed past or whatever their life is without really questioning them, because you don't think, oh, they could be lying to me or anything like that, or trying to get me to feel a certain way. You're not thinking that. And that's a very interesting situation. Now, the interesting part too is that you begin to feel in this narcissistic dynamic. So in this narcissistic relationship that you're in, you don't even know that you're dealing with a narcissist. You believe what's happening to be true. And in this fact, the problem is you're not seeing it for what it is because you've become emotionally invested. And the sex was very quick as well. So in these narcissistic relationships, they're very quick to have sex at any time with you, all kinds of different sex at any time, any moment, anytime you want to do this in the beginning. And you're like, wow, this is what a real relationship is. I'm going to marry this person. This is it. This is the end all be all. Now that's going to dry up and change, but you're not prepared for that. So the problem is you're going into this thinking this is going to last forever when it's definitely not. Now, the interesting part about it is they kind of get you all set up. Like there's all this attention, there's some gifts, there's if they can't afford to get you gifts, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of romanticizing, there's a lot of, romanticizing the situation and building this up to be the end all be all. However, eventually there's a devaluation period of time. So eventually these things are going to change. The rug is going to be pulled up from underneath you and you're not expecting it. And that's where a lot of people get confused is they don't know that, hey, I'm in this narcissistic relationship. They don't know that first. Two, they don't know what love bombing is. Three, they have no idea that this is a narrative that's been contrived. Four, they have no idea what devaluation is. Five, they don't even know that they're already under control. And six, they don't even know this is a pattern of behavior. Okay, so the devaluation, what happens here is that warmth and that love begins to disappear. As an example, I have a client that was talking about it a while back, and we've moved on from this relationship. But, she was making, the significant other was making dinner every night, for him when he got home, giving him a massage, sex, all that stuff. Well, that started waning within a few months and eventually disappeared. And then that love and that support and all these really nice things being said, and oh, you're this amazing person, and I totally love you, and I care about everything you're doing, and oh, what you're doing is so amazing and so smart and so intelligent. All that changes, and it begins to become criticism. It begins to become criticism. It begins to be kind of mean. There's a little bit of put downs. Then there becomes this emotional distance that you never had with this person, so you don't really understand it. And then there's this mixed signals, where you have these mixed signals where one minute they're really happy with you and the next they're not. One minute they're sexual with you, the next they're not. One minute they want to do things with you, the next they're not really happy to hear from you, or they have other things going on, or they'll need to talk to you later, or they don't want to do anything. They don't want to go out. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to be with you. And then maybe a few hours later, yeah, maybe we can go do something together, what have you. There's a lot of blame too. So remember that the devaluation, they've taken you off the pedestal, because I believe in the narcissistic mind, I believe that they actually do have this love affair with the image of something, not the person. So they don't really love the person. It's the image of being with this person, or what this person can do for them. What can they get from being with this person? So that becomes romanticized in their mind. Hence why the sex begins in the beginning of the relationship and it's intense, because it's not about being with you. It's about getting what they want. It's about creating that reality. It's about getting you to break down your doors and your boundaries, but also at the same time, it's also about getting you in a situation where you stop thinking about what's right for you and you start giving in this relationship and trusting across the board. Now, the interesting part that is, instead of you saying, hey, this is BS, I'm going to wake up, I'm tired of this relationship, I don't like this pattern of behavior, they're putting me down, they're criticizing me, they're blaming me, this is red flags for me. Instead, though, most people go the other way. They try harder. Now, if you're codependent, you try really hard. So if you have a lot of codependent tendencies, you're like, this person's unhappy with me, things aren't working out. How can I make this person happy? How can I make them feel this way again? What do I have to do to make them feel this way again? What is it within me? What am I doing wrong? Now, the person with borderline tendencies is going to be like, oh my God, this person, they're going to leave me. They're going to leave me. I'm not going to have anybody. And also, a lot of times, people with BPD tendencies were raised by people with NPD or narcissistic tendencies. So, this is almost like a trauma bond already because we're still trying to get our mom or dad's love. And now we're going to try to get it in this relationship as well. The same for people with codependent tendencies. Many were raised around narcissistic parents, either a narcissistic mother or father. And so here we are trying to get the praise, trying to get the acceptance, trying to get the love now. And it's not just from this person, right? This is a trigger from childhood. So it's really even more deeply seated. It's more overwhelming. It's more traumatic and dramatic. And so, you're trying to get this back. You're trying to get this person to be like it was in the beginning. Now, the other person in this relationship, now if somebody's solid and not doesn't have codependent issues, was not raised by a narcissist, was not raised by a borderline parent, is not borderline raised by a narcissistic parent. If somebody's really just really solid and done the work, they will go on an end and walk out stage right, usually in this situation, because they're tired of it. They see the difference. They're not going to try to get back on that pedestal. Now, for many of us, so however, that have either gone through recovery from codependency or worked on themselves or recovery or working with DPT skills and working on recovery from BPD as well, this is a different story because we're still dealing with the trauma drama from the past relationships, the past marriage, or normally the past parental guidance that did not give us the love and support. And we're truncating that on top of this situation and that situation. And so we have this whole big situation of trauma based on narcissistic type abuse that we are dealing with. So it's not just person. It's not that this person is the one person that has created it. This is where it actually comes. So what happens then is that the people in the relationship with the narcissist start to feel bad, start to get depressed. Their personal value begins to take a hit because they've put so much value on this relationship, on how this person feels about them. And so remember, the narcissist is going to employ certain types of techniques. The narcissist will employ certain techniques, and those techniques are guilt, silent treatment, gaslighting, jealousy, intermittent affection, and forever ammunition. If you don't know what forever ammunition is in a narcissistic relationship, it's when the narcissist uses things that they learned from you during the love bombing stage. They've learned these things about you, private things about you, that they can throw back in your face every time there's an argument or a problem to make you feel bad, to make you feel sad, to make you feel guilty and shamed. This is all on point. It's all done specifically to make you feel a certain way. And it's all done for them to gain control. Now, remember, the silent treatment is very well used to get what they want. They get silent. They control you by controlling the communication. Remember, the silent treatment is the control used by a narcissist to control the line of communication so that they actually stop the communication in its tracks. You can't argue with somebody when they won't speak to you. This is very much on purpose. And I know that many of you out there had this happen with a parent dynamic growing up where mom or dad just wouldn't talk to you for several days when you did something wrong. And you would sit there and beg and plead for them to talk to you. Very painful growing up as a child in this. That's really abuse. When you're doing this to a child or even an adult, the silent treatment is definitely abuse. So remember that. If you're dealing with the silent treatment from somebody, a loved one, a parent, a spouse, just because it's not hurting you, they're not beating you up, they're not hitting you, this is still abuse. The silent treatment is a way to control the narrative, the communication, and it stops you from communicating with them. And the more you beg them to communicate, the more they relish in that, the more power they get from you, and the more control that they get in the relationship. So I want you to really think about this. So all of a sudden they start garnishing all this control, gaslighting you, manipulating you, turning things around, blaming you for situations. And then you begin to feel worse and worse and worse about the situation. And then you start trying to avoid conflict. So conflict happens, and instead of bringing up anything or standing up for yourself, you do the opposite. You get quiet. You safeguard yourself. You try to minimize it. You allow them to get away with things because you don't want to have another argument. So the thing is, we have to realize in this narcissistic relationship dynamic, there is the cycle. Just because you had the idealization and this attachment, this devaluation, and this control happen, now it's going to all happen again. Many of you might have gotten to a point where you're ready to leave, but guess what happens? They become nice again. They become loving again. They start making dinner, they start hanging out again, sex is back again, things are okay. "Oh, wow, we're gonna take a trip," all these things, and you're like, "Oh, wow, things are getting better." I knew if I just waited out long enough, they would turn around and become who they were when we first met, and so this hope comes around. Now the problem is that I hate to bust the bubble, but the type of hope that we're talking about in a narcissistic relationship is actually false hope. It's not real because this is a cycle pattern of abuse, a cycle pattern of intermittent attention. Intermittent attention is giving attention, taking it away, giving you a lot of attention, breadcrumbing you. And the cycle repeats constantly. So you're going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. You're going to be idolized for a moment, then devalued, idolized for maybe 2 days, then completely devalued. It gets shorter and shorter. So the good stuff becomes shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter to the point where we're talking about breadcrumbs, crumbing, right? When you're just getting the crumbs, you're not getting the full loaf of bread anymore. You're getting the crumbs. And so this works because the love bombing creates this emotional benchmark in the beginning that keeps you hoping that the relationship is going to go back to that beginning part. And many people stay because they think maybe I can get that again because that was really appealing. I got a lot of attention. I felt really good. And maybe they can be that way. Maybe it's something I'm doing that I can change to get them to do this again. And many people stay in the relationship because they're chasing that version of the beginning. They're not really getting much anymore. Actually, they're getting quite nothing. Eventually, years into these relationships, you haven't gotten anything in a very long time. You might get a crumb here and there, but you glorify and glamorize this crumb. And then eventually the times become more and more and more negative. And so you're just trying to figure out how to get back to the beginning. And unfortunately, in today's podcast, I'm letting you know that the beginning was not real. It was a mirage. It was created and falsified to get you to let down your guard, to allow this person into your life so they could use you for your resources or whatever it is that they're looking for to get your love, to get your supply. And ultimately, a narcissist needs supply. So they're looking for people to get supply from your attention, your love. And if you're dealing with somebody, so if you actually have borderline tendencies and you're dealing with a narcissist that keeps pulling away and keeps like, basically gaslighting you and giving you the silent treatment and ghosting you, you're fighting to get their attention again. You're fighting to get it back because it's so overwhelming that you're not getting this attention from them. As a codependent, that you're still dealing with codependency. If you dealt with a father or mother that was narcissistic that would do this to you, it's almost like you don't realize that we get blinders on because we go back to childhood and we almost feel like we're shell shocked because we're dealing with the situation again. We don't realize that this is actually predicated on the previous relationship of our upbringing. And so I want you to really think about this in the cycle pattern. If you're doing this and dealing with this right now, what are you wanting to get back to? What is the situation that you're wanting to get back to? What is the timeline? And I think many of you would say the beginning of the relationship is what you would like to get back to. I want you to look at that beginning of the relationship and analyze, is that relationship part real? Was that an actual real part of the relationship? Was that person ever like that again for real? And then when you look back at the beginning of their relationship, I want you to look at it. Did they ever really divulge much about their life? And the things that they did tell you about, was that really true? Or can we actually not confirm that at this time? That many of you would say that you really can't confirm it at this time because you don't know if it's real or not. And unfortunately, that is the case. And so I also want you to think about the forever ammunition. I'm sure that there's been some stuff thrown in your face about things that you did in the past. And I want you to think about that forever ammunition that is being thrown in your face and think about when you did divulge that information, usually within the first few months of the relationship. Now, if you're going through this, I just want you to think about how we can want something to come back, but the problem is that we can only get it back if it was real to begin with. And so let's analyze. So think about the beginning of the relationship. As we've talked about, the idealization, the love bombing, the attention, then the devaluation, then the control, then the cycle pattern. With all that in mind, was this actually true? And I think if you analyze it and see it for what it is without sugarcoating it, you realize this wasn't real. And so now we have to take a step back and analyze, how do we move forward in this relationship? Do we need to step back and figure out how to get out of it? Do you confront it? And I know that many of you have confronted it and it doesn't work. And I'm just here to tell you a narcissist is usually not going to change. Okay. And they're going to turn it around on you and gaslight you and also project on you their issues and problems. So the more that you try to bring it up, the more they're going to project on you. And so you're basically living in a life with somebody that doesn't live in the same world as you. And unfortunately, we live in a different world from other people. What happens? Well, it's kind of unhappiness because we can't see eye to eye. And that's definitely something that I want you to think about because